He left her standing in the rain at her grandmother's grave, trading his loyal wife for her best friend and a life of picture-perfect vanity. He thought he was the billionaire in the room. He was wrong. Naomi Carter wasn't just a grieving granddaughter. She was the secret heir to a fortune that could buy and sell him twice over. Revenge isn't just sweet. It's a hostile takeover. Greetings, my cherished, faithful, and beautiful family. I am your brother, Mr. Davies. May the Creator of heaven and earth shield you from those who smile in your face while plotting your fall. May He grant the women of this family, our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, the vision to see their true worth. Even when the world tries to make them feel small, may every man here learn that true wealth is found in a loyal heart, not in vanity or status. May those who have been abandoned in their darkest hour find that God has prepared a table for them in the presence of their enemies. May your silence be your strength, and your comeback be your testimony. Amen. The story opens under the gray, weeping willows of a segregated, historic cemetery in Charleston. Naomi Carter stands alone by her grandmother's fresh grave, the rain mingling with the tears on her face. The atmosphere is heavy with the kind of grief that rattles your bones. We immediately see the cracks in her support system. Her husband, Grant Whitmore, checks his Rolex, visibly annoyed by the mud on his Italian loafers. He isn't mourning, he's calculating. Beside him stands Maddie Pierce, Naomi's best friend, clinging to Grant's arm a little too tightly for comfort. It breaks my heart that Naomi had to face that gravesite all alone while her husband checked his watch. Comment "Stay strong" below to show support for anyone who has been abandoned in their darkest hour. Don't ignore this. Show them they aren't alone. The Spanish moss draped over the headstones like tattered gray rags, weeping under the relentless Charleston downpour. Naomi Carter didn't feel the cold seeping through her black dress. She only felt the hollow ache in her chest where her grandmother used to be. The pastor's voice was a low drone, struggling to rise above the sound of thunder, but Naomi heard none of it. She was fixated on the mahogany casket being lowered into the wet earth, the finality of it crushing her breath. Beside her, Grant shifted his weight, his sharp exhale audible enough to turn heads in the small gathering. He wasn't looking at the grave. He was staring at his wrist, the platinum face of his Rolex catching the dull light. Naomi, he whispered, the name sounding more like a complaint than a comfort. The lawyers are scheduled for 3. We need to wrap this up. He glanced down at his Italian loafers, grimacing as a splatter of low-country mud hit the pristine leather. To him, this wasn't a goodbye to the woman who raised his wife. It was a scheduling conflict. On Grant's other side stood Maddie Pierce, Naomi's best friend since college, or so she thought. Maddie squeezed Naomi's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging in just a little too hard. "Be strong, sweetie," Maddie cooed, her voice dripping with a syrup that didn't quite reach her eyes. She leaned into Grant, her shoulder brushing his, a gesture too intimate for this solemn occasion. "Grant's right, though. You look terrible. We should get you out of this rain." They were erasing her grief before the body was even covered. Grant checked his phone again, his thumbs flying across the screen as he likely texted his pilot. "Go to the car," Naomi whispered, her voice cracking. "I need a moment, just go." Grant didn't hesitate. He turned on his heel, Maddie trailing him like a shadow. Naomi wiped the rain from her eyes and followed them, dreading the ride home. That was when the figure emerged from the shelter of an ancient oak. He was an elderly black man, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked decades old but was impeccably pressed. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, ignoring the rain that pelted his fedora. He stopped in front of Naomi, his eyes kind but serious. "Naomi Carter?" he asked, his voice gravelly and deep. She nodded, too drained to speak. He reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy, velvet-bound ledger. It looked ancient, the indigo fabric worn smooth at the corners. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this immediately," he said, pressing it into her trembling hands. "Don't let them see it, child. The Obsidian Trust belongs to you now." Before she could ask who he was, he tipped his hat and vanished into the mist, leaving her holding a secret that weighed heavier than the grave itself. The ride back to the estate was suffocatingly quiet. Grant sat on the opposite leather bench of the Mercedes Sprinter, pouring himself a scotch from the built-in bar. He didn't offer her one. Maddie was checking emails on her phone, but Naomi noticed the way her eyes darted nervously toward Grant every few seconds. The heavy velvet ledger burned against Naomi's thigh, hidden beneath the folds of her wet coat. She clutched it like a lifeline, the mysterious old man's warning echoing in her mind. Don't let them see it. When they arrived at the house, a sprawling, modern glass box that felt more like a museum than a home, Grant didn't go to his office as usual. Instead, he led them into the sunken living room. "Sit down, Naomi," he said, his tone devoid of warmth. It wasn't a suggestion. Naomi sat on the edge of the cream sofa, careful not to drip rainwater on the upholstery. Maddie remained standing near the fireplace, refusing to meet Naomi's gaze. "I'm filing for divorce," Grant said. He didn't stutter. He didn't look pained. He said it with the same casual efficiency he used to fire underperforming junior executives. The air left the room. Naomi blinked, her mind still back at the cemetery. "Grant, my grandmother just died. Today." "I know the timing isn't ideal," he replied, taking a sip of his scotch. "But there's never a good time for this. The truth is, we've outgrown each other. I'm building an empire, Naomi. I need a partner who fits that future. Someone who understands the optics, the social game." He gestured vaguely toward her, as if her grief-stricken face was a stain on his brand. "You've always been content with being small." "Small?" Naomi whispered, a spark of anger finally cutting through the numbness. "I gave up my career to support your startup. I planned every gala, every dinner party." "You attended them," Grant corrected sharply. "You didn't work the room. Maddie understands this world." The name hung in the air, like a guillotine blade. Naomi slowly turned to look at her best friend. Maddie was twisting her diamond tennis bracelet, her face flushed. "I'm sorry, Naomi," Maddie said, her voice trembling with a rehearsed sort of pity. "We didn't plan for this to happen. We connected. While you were away caring for your grandmother these last 6 months, Grant was so lonely. He needed someone who could keep up." The realization hit Naomi with the force of a physical blow. The late nights at the office, the networking trips to Dubai and Paris that Maddie had also coincidentally gone on. The way they stood together at the funeral, a united front against her sorrow. They hadn't just started this. They had been waiting for her grandmother to die so they could discard her without the bad PR of leaving a wife during a family crisis. "Get out," Naomi said, her voice low. Grant laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "It's my house, Naomi. My name is on the deed. My lawyers have already drafted a settlement. It's generous, considering you brought nothing into this marriage." He placed a manila envelope on the coffee table. "Sign it, take the payout, and let us move on. Don't make this ugly." Naomi looked at the envelope, then at the two people she had loved most in the world. The betrayal didn't break her. It calcified her. She felt the weight of the ledger against her side, the legacy of the Obsidian Trust pulsing like a second heartbeat. Small, he had called her. "I'll read it," she said, standing up with a dignity that silenced them both. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked out of the room, clutching her grandmother's book, leaving them to celebrate their victory in a war they didn't even know had just begun. Naomi waited until the heavy oak door of the guest room clicked shut and locked before she allowed her knees to buckle. She slid down to the floor, the velvet ledger heavy in her lap. Outside, the rain continued to batter the glass, mirroring the storm raging inside her. Grant and Maddie were likely downstairs, clinking glasses to their freedom. But Naomi's world had narrowed to the indigo book in her hands. With trembling fingers, she undid the brass clasp. The pages weren't filled with recipes or diary entries. They were filled with numbers, meticulous, handwritten columns of stocks, bonds, and acquisition dates dating back to the 1950s. The names were recognizable titans of industry: steel, pharmaceuticals, early tech startups. Tucked inside the back cover was a business card embossed with silver leaf. Sterling and Vance, private counsel. On the back, in her grandmother's shaky handwriting, was a note. "Ask for Elias. Trust only him." Naomi slipped out the servants' entrance, while Grant and Maddie celebrated downstairs. 2 hours later, she sat in a dim, wood-paneled office in downtown Charleston, a stark contrast to the sterile, glass-walled conference rooms Grant preferred. Elias Vance was the man from the cemetery. He sat behind a mahogany desk that looked older than the Constitution, watching her with eyes that had seen everything. "Your grandmother, Maud, was a domestic worker for the DuPonts in the 40s, Elias began, his voice a low rumble. But she wasn't just cleaning. She was listening. She took every penny she earned and invested it based on what she heard in those parlors. She had an instinct for value that Wall Street couldn't teach. Naomi stared at him, her mind reeling. Grandma Maud? She clipped coupons. She reused tea bags. Wealth whispers, Naomi. Only the insecure scream, Elias said, a faint smile touching his lips. He slid a thick portfolio across the desk. She built the Obsidian Trust to protect you. She knew the world would try to take it from a black woman in the South. So she became a ghost, a silent partner. He opened the file. The final figure at the bottom of the balance sheet made the room spin. 2 billion? Naomi choked out. With a B? Liquid, Elias corrected gently. That doesn't include the real estate holdings in Savannah or the intellectual property rights. You are the sole beneficiary, effective immediately. Naomi stared at the number. It was enough to buy Grant's entire company 3 times over. It was enough to bury Maddie in the very designer labels she coveted. But then the fear spiked. Grant filed for divorce today. If he finds out, he will claim it is marital property. Elias finished, his expression hardening. He will try to take half, and knowing his lawyers, he might succeed. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. That is why the trust has been dormant. To the world, you are destitute. You must remain so until the ink on that divorce decree is dry. Can you do that, Naomi? Can you let them believe they've won? Naomi thought of Grant's sneer. You've always been content with being small. She thought of Maddie's fake sympathy, a cold, sharp clarity settled over her, it drying her tears instantly. She closed the portfolio. "They want small?" Naomi said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "I'll give them microscopic, and when they're not looking, I'll buy the microscope." Silence is expensive, Naomi, but freedom is priceless. Let them think you are weak, and they will never look for your strength. Elias's final instruction echoed in her mind as she sat in the conference room at Whitmore Tech. It was a glass cage suspended 40 floors above the city, designed to intimidate. Grant sat at the head of the table, flanked by his legal team. 3 men in pinstripes who looked at her like she was a stain on the carpet. "The terms are final," Grant's lead counsel said, sliding a thick document across the polished mahogany. "A lump sum of $100,000, the 2022 Audi, and no spousal support. In exchange, you waive all rights to future claims on Whitmore Technologies or Mr. Whitmore's personal assets. There is also a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding the marriage and the divorce." $100,000. It was an insult. It was less than what Grant spent on his annual getaway to St. Bart's. A month ago, Naomi would have fought. She would have screamed about the years she spent building his confidence, the nights she nursed him through panic attacks before his IPO. But today, she just stared at the pen. Grant checked his watch, the same impatient tick from the funeral. "Just sign it, Naomi. Don't embarrass yourself by asking for more. You know you can't afford a lawyer to fight us." Naomi picked up the pen. She forced her hand to tremble, letting her shoulders slump in a perfect performance of defeat. She needed them to see a broken woman, not a billionaire in waiting. I just want it to be over," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We all do," Grant muttered, not even looking up from his phone. Naomi pressed the pen to the paper. The scratch of the ink felt like a key turning in a lock. With every signature, she wasn't losing a husband, she was protecting a dynasty. She signed the last page and pushed the document back. "Smart girl," Grant said, finally standing up. He didn't offer a handshake. "Security will escort you out. Maddie is moving in on Monday, so have your things out by Sunday night." Naomi stood up, clutching her purse. She walked to the elevator without looking back. As the heavy glass doors began to slide shut, she heard Grant's voice boom through the open conference room, loud and triumphant. He was on speakerphone with Maddie. "It's done, babe." She folded like a cheap lawn chair, signed everything away for pennies. Grant laughed, the sound grating and cruel. "I told you she didn't have the spine to fight me. We kept the fortune." Naomi watched the gap between the doors close, obscuring his gloating face. A ghost of a smile touched her lips as the elevator began its descent. He was right about one thing. He had kept his fortune. But he had no idea he had just signed away his future to the woman who now had the power to buy it. 3 months of silence is a lifetime in high society. To Grant and Maddie, Naomi Carter had simply evaporated, a minor inconvenience flushed away with a settlement check. They assumed she was wallowing in some rental apartment, drowning in regret. They were wrong. Naomi wasn't drowning, she was molting. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the penthouse of the St. Regis, Naomi adjusted the lapel of her structured black blazer. The fabric shimmered slightly under the chandelier, a subtle armor woven from silk and midnight. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Gone were the sensible cardigans and the apologetic posture. In their place stood a predator. Her hair, once pulled back in modest buns, now cascaded in sleek, obsidian waves that framed a face sculpted by determination. Her makeup was flawless, a sharp cat eye and a lip color the shade of a fresh wound. But it was the jewelry that made the statement. Heavy gold drop earrings tipped with rare South Sea pearls, swinging gently as she turned. They whispered of old money, of power that didn't need to shout. "The incorporation papers are ready, Miss Carter," Elias said from the seating area behind her. He held a gold fountain pen, watching her transformation with a look of quiet pride. "The board of the shell company is staffed with proxies. Your name won't appear on a single public filing." Naomi turned, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. She took the seat opposite him, crossing her legs with a grace that felt lethal. She picked up the document. At the top, printed in stark, serif font, was the name of her weapon, N.C. Ventures. N.C. Ventures, she mused, tracing the letters. "It sounds innocuous, boring even." "That is the point," Elias replied. "It sounds like a mid-level hedge fund, the kind companies like Whitmore Tech ignore until it's too late." "And the capital?" "Fully liquid. $2 billion sitting in the Cayman accounts, ready to deploy. We have the liquidity to absorb distressed assets across 3 continents. Naomi uncapped the pen. The last time she had signed a legal document, she had been shaking, signing away her life to escape a man who despised her. Today, her hand was steady as stone. She wasn't just signing a business registration, she was signing a declaration of war. "Let's go shopping, Elias," she said, signing her name with a flourish that looked like a blade. "I hear the market is volatile, and I'm in the mood to acquire some debt." The financial autopsy of Whitmore Technologies was displayed across the wall of monitors in the NC Ventures war room, a kaleidoscope of red graphs and declining trend lines. Naomi stood before the screens, a mug of black coffee in hand, studying the anatomy of her ex-husband's arrogance. To the public, Grant was a visionary billionaire. To the trained eye, he was a gambler playing with money he didn't have. "He's hemorrhaging cash," Elias said, tapping a tablet. The expansion into the Asian market stalled, but he didn't scale back. Instead, he doubled down on personal spending. The yacht in Monaco, the estate renovation, and this wedding to Ms. Pierce, the budget is astronomical. Naomi zoomed in on a specific column. "Where is he getting the liquidity?" "His cash flow is negative." "Mezzanine financing," Elias replied, a hint of disdain in his voice. "High-interest, short-term loans secured against his majority stake in the company. He's leveraged Whitmore Tech to the hilt to maintain the illusion of unlimited wealth. He's betting everything that the Q4 earnings will save him." Naomi smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He's betting on a miracle. And the banks? They're nervous," Elias confirmed. "They hold $40 million in promissory notes that mature next month. They know the company is shaky. If someone offered to buy that debt off them today, fast and clean, they'd take 70 cents on the dollar just to be rid of the risk," Naomi finished. It was almost too easy. Grant was so focused on curating the perfect image for his new life with Maddie that he had left the back door to his empire unlocked. He treated his company like a personal piggy bank, assuming the revenue would always be there to refill it. He had forgotten the cardinal rule of business. Debt is only a tool until it becomes a noose. "Buy it," Naomi commanded softly. "Buy the notes from First National, the private equity loans, all of it. I want NC Ventures to be the sole holder of Grant Whitmore's debt." "If we do that," Elias warned, "technically you will own him. If he misses a single payment, I can foreclose," Naomi said, turning away from the screen to look out at the skyline. Somewhere out there, Grant and Maddie were likely tasting cakes or fitting tuxedos, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath them had just been sold. I don't just want the debt, Elias. I want the acceleration clauses. When the time comes, I want to be able to call it all in at once. Consider it done, Elias said. Naomi took a sip of her coffee. It tasted bitter, just the way she liked it now. She wasn't just his ex-wife anymore. She was his landlord, his banker, and soon his executioner. Maddie Pierce lived for the lens. Her entire existence was a carefully curated performance of exclusive luncheons and front-row seats, all managed by the Summit Agency, the city's premier PR firm, and draped in the couture of Maison Dubois. To Maddie, these weren't just services. They were the oxygen that sustained her social climbing. She had no idea that the air supply had just been purchased by the woman she betrayed. Naomi sat in the plush leather chair of the CEO's office at Maison Dubois, a glass of sparkling water in hand. The acquisition had been quiet, folded into NC Ventures' luxury portfolio just 48 hours ago. Across the desk, the head designer, a nervous man named Julian with a penchant for silk scarves, wrung his hands. The gown is, It was nearly finished, Madame Carter. Julian stammered. Custom lace from Chantilly. The bodice was hand-beaded. Was, Naomi corrected gently, placing her cup on the saucer with a soft clink. But I hear there have been unforeseen complications. A supply chain error? A sudden loss of the archived silk? Julian swallowed hard, understanding the subtext immediately. In this world, the owner's whim was law. Yes, a tragedy. The shipment was damaged, irreparably. We will have to inform Ms. Brave Pierce that her dress cannot be completed in time for the wedding. And the alternative options? Off the rack, Julian whispered, looking horrified. Last season. Perfect, Naomi murmured. But the dress was only the first domino. Next came the guest list. Naomi picked up her phone and dialed the senior partner at the Summit Agency, which she now effectively controlled through a majority stake. Ms. Carter, the voice on the line answered instantly. The charity gala for the Children's Hospital, Naomi said, her voice smooth. Move it to the same night as the Whitmore wedding. Make it the event of the season. Exclusive invites only. If they are seen at the wedding instead of the gala, they are off the A-list. The effect was immediate and brutal. Over the next week, Maddie's phone stopped buzzing with congratulations and started buzzing with regrets. Her bridesmaids, socialites who followed status like moths to a flame, suddenly had unavoidable family commitments. The influencers she had hired to cover the ceremony pulled out, citing conflict of interest. From the safety of her penthouse, Naomi watched Maddie's social media feed unravel. The perfectly filtered selfies were replaced by vague, passive-aggressive quotes about fake friends and jealousy. Maddie was posting manic updates about vendor incompetence. Unaware that the incompetence was manufactured, she was screaming into a void that Naomi had built. Maddie wanted to be the queen of society. But she was slowly realizing that her castle was built on sand, and Naomi controlled the tide. The grand hall of the Belvedere Hotel was draped in white orchids and crystal, a display of opulence that reeked of desperation. Despite the cancellations, Grant had managed to fill the room with B-list celebrities and business associates who were too afraid of his temper to decline. Maddie stood at the altar in her ill-fitting, off-the-rack gown, a strained smile plastered on her face as Grant raised his champagne glass for the toast. To love, Grant announced, his voice booming over the microphone, slightly slurred. And to those who doubted us, look at us now. The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a resounding thud that silenced the room. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Naomi Carter stood in the threshold. She wasn't wearing black. She was wearing blood red. The custom silk gown clung to her like a second skin, bold and unapologetic, with the Obsidian Trust's signature gold pearls glowing at her throat. She didn't walk. She glided, her heels clicking a rhythmic countdown on the marble floor as she advanced toward the stage. Security guards stepped forward to intercept her, but paused when they saw the team of lawyers trailing in her wake. "Naomi?" Grant lowered his glass, his face flushing with anger. "What the hell is this? Security! Get her out of here." "They work for me now, Grant," Naomi said, her voice amplified by the lapel mic she had clipped on moments before entering. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly clear. "Just like the catering staff, just like the venue manager. In fact, I bought the Belvedere last week. You're trespassing." Maddie gasped, clutching Grant's arm. "Grant, do something." Naomi reached the foot of the stage and tossed a thick folder onto the table in front of them. It landed with a heavy slap, knocking over a crystal flute. "That is a notice of foreclosure," Naomi announced, turning to face the stunned crowd. "As of this morning, NC Ventures has called in the $40 million of debt owed by Whitmore Technologies. Since you lack the liquidity to pay, I have exercised the clause to seize the collateral." Grant picked up the folder, his hands shaking violently as he read the first page. The color drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale. You own the debt. You're NC Ventures?" "I own the debt. I own the building. I own the company," Naomi said, locking eyes with him. She stepped up onto the stage, towering over a cowering Maddie. "You told me you needed a partner who understands this world, Grant. You wanted someone who understands power, optics, and ownership." She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper that the microphone caught and broadcast to every stunned guest. "Now you have one. Me." The room erupted in chaos. But Naomi stood still in the center of the storm, the queen of the ashes she had just created. The silence that followed Naomi's declaration was broken by the sharp crash of Grant dropping his champagne glass. He stepped over the shards and lunged toward her, face purple with rage, but two burly security guards, men who had worked for him for years, men whose bonuses he had cut to pay for this very wedding, intercepted him mid-stride. They didn't look at him with fear anymore. They looked at him with the cold indifference of employees who knew who signed their new paychecks. "Get your hands off me!" Grant screamed, trashing like a caught fish as they hauled him toward the exit. "I'm Grant Whitmore. I built this city." "And now you're trespassing on private property," Naomi said coolly, watching him struggle. "Remove Mr. Whitmore and Ms. Pierce." Maddie stood frozen, her off-the-rack dress suddenly looking like a costume. She looked from Grant, humiliated and broken, to Naomi, regal and untouchable. For a split second, she looked like she might beg, but the wall of ice in Naomi's eyes stopped her. Security escorted her out, her heels dragging on the marble, leaving a silence that felt heavy with justice. Grant thought he could throw Naomi away like trash because she didn't fit his aesthetic. But karma had other plans. Like this video if you believe that what goes around always comes back around. If you don't like it, you're basically saying Grant deserved to get away with it. An hour later, the red dress was gone. Naomi stood once again under the weeping willows of the Charleston cemetery. The rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling of wet earth and renewal. She placed a single white orchid, taken from the center of the wedding bouquet, on her grandmother's headstone. "You were right, Grandma," Naomi whispered, touching the cold granite. "They didn't see me coming. They only saw what they wanted to see. But they see me now." She didn't cry this time. The grief was still there, a dull ache, but the helplessness was gone. She had taken the pain and forged it into a crown. 6 months later, the face on the newsstand wasn't a tech bro or a movie star. It was Naomi Carter, graced in emerald silk on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, "The Silent Billionaire: How Naomi Carter Built an Empire from the Shadows." Inside the magazine, buried on page 42, was a small blurb about the bankruptcy proceedings of Grant Whitmore, whose assets were being liquidated to pay off creditors. Rumor had it he was sleeping on a friend's couch in a studio apartment. As for Maddie, the court dockets showed a filing for an annulment, citing fraud and financial misrepresentation. She was back in her hometown, working retail, far away from the social circles she had desperation to climb. Grant chased a status symbol and lost his empire. Naomi chose dignity and gained the world. If you believe integrity is more important than image, turn on post notifications. If you don't subscribe, I guess we know which side you're on.